I should have walked away when his fingers brushed mine, but I didn't. I stayed still, watched him. Then he said, "You know, you can stop this if you want to." I wanted to, but I didn't. It was just a glance, just a touch. But something in me cracked open that night, and nothing's felt the same, since you're not going to believe where that one moment led us. So stay with me. Because once a line blurs, it never really sharpens again. If you've ever felt something, you couldn't name something quiet, but impossible to ignore, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. This story might sound familiar, and that's okay. Funny how a house can feel completely different with just one new person inside. When Evan moved in, it wasn't dramatic. No big announcement, no chaos, just a quiet arrival, a duffel bag, a tired smile, and that same polite tone he always used. "Hey Claire, thanks for letting me crash here for a while, Harold. My husband was thrilled to have his son back under the same roof. I told myself I was too. After all, Evan was family. Technically, he was 22, just finished college in California. Tall, quiet, thoughtful. He had his mother's eyes, they said. But I'd never met her. She passed before I came into the picture. To me, he was just Harold's boy. Well-mannered, distant friendly, in a formal kind of way. The first few days, we hardly crossed paths. He stayed mostly upstairs, settling into the guest room. I kept busy with the things I always kept busy with: work, emails, garden chores, pretending to be organized. But something shifted that third morning. I came down early, before Harold woke up. I had my robe on. Nothing scandalous. Just soft cotton tied at the waist. My hair still damp from a quick shower. Coffee brewing. And then I heard footsteps. I turned. Evan stood there, leaning in the kitchen doorway. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, not like a son looking at a mother, not even like a young man looking at a woman. It was different. Slower, softer, but heavier. His eyes didn't move. And I didn't move either. I don't remember what broke the moment. Maybe the kettle whistled. Maybe I looked away first. But even hours later, folding laundry or trimming roses, I could still feel his eyes on me. There's a kind of tension that doesn't announce itself. It just hums under the surface. Low constant, alive. After that morning in the kitchen, things didn't exactly change, but they tilted. It started with small things, too small to mention out loud, but not too small to notice. He started sitting at the kitchen counter while I cooked, saying he liked the smell of garlic on the stove. He started asking about my day, not in the way a son would. His questions were deeper, slower, intentional. One afternoon, I bent down to take something from the oven, and when I turned, he was behind me. Close, too close, I startled. He just smiled. "Sorry," he said, but he didn't step back right away. Another time, I was folding laundry on the couch. He came over to help, picked up one of my dresses, held it out in front of him, and said, "Red suits you." He said it quietly. No smile, no joking tone, just fact. I felt my cheeks flush. And then there were the glances, the ones that lingered just a second too long. The way his eyes would drop to my collarbone when I laughed, or how he always seemed to be standing just a bit too close in the hallway. I started wearing different clothes. Not for him, I told myself. But the truth, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be looked at that way. And I liked it. I started doing my hair differently, wearing perfume again. There was a mirror in the downstairs hallway, and I'd catch myself pausing there before dinner, not to fix my hair, to wonder what was I doing? Who was I becoming? But then I'd hear Harold's footsteps, or the dog would bark, and just like that, the air would clear, but not for long. It was unintentional. At least, I think it was. That evening was humid, thick, slow-moving air that clung to the skin. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel-wrapped, moving through the hallway toward my bedroom. I closed the door, almost just enough to feel private, but not quite shut. Maybe I was careless. Maybe I wanted the air to circulate. Maybe something in me didn't want it fully closed. I didn't hear his footsteps until they were right outside. And by then, I was standing in front of my mirror, dressing slowly, deliberately, sliding the straps of my slip over damp shoulders, smoothing fabric over my hips. That's when I felt it. Not a breeze, not a sound, but that quiet, watching. I turned my head. The door was open just a crack, and in that crack, Evan, he didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. I could have yelled. I could have pulled the door shut, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for my perfume, spritzed once right behind my neck. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. When I glanced back again, he was gone. The hallway, empty. The moment evaporated, except it wasn't, because later over dinner, he wouldn't look at me, and I couldn't stop looking at him. Something had been seen. Something had passed between us, and it could never be unseen again. Sometimes silence is louder than thunder. The rain started early that evening. It wasn't the gentle kind. It slammed against the windows, rattling the glass, like it had something to say. The sky outside pulsed with flashes of lightning, turning the living room a strange blue-gray. Every few seconds, Harold was away on a business trip. The house was too quiet. At around 10 p.m., the power went out. No lights, no hum of the refrigerator, just rain, thunder, and breath. I lit a few candles, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway, and one on the living room table. I walked into the living room, and there he was, Evan, sitting on the couch, in the dark, shirtless, in sweatpants, one leg stretched out, one arm draped behind the cushion. The candlelight flickered across his skin, casting shadows. I shouldn't have noticed, but did. He looked up, said nothing, just patted the empty space beside him. And I sat down. We didn't speak. The storm outside raged. Inside, we just breathed. At one point, the thunder cracked so loud, I flinched. He turned toward me just slightly and said, "You okay?" I nodded, but then he reached out. Just his fingers, just enough to touch my wrist. Soft, steady, warm. It was the first time we touched on purpose. I didn't pull away. He didn't move further. We stayed like that, wrist to fingers, for what felt like forever. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything you could name, but it was something, a current, a permission, a shared silence full of things neither of us could say, but both of us felt. When I finally stood up, I couldn't meet his eyes, but I felt them follow me all the way down the hallway, and I swear I heard him whisper my name when he thought I was too far to hear. Sometimes the loudest moments are the ones that never happen. The night after the storm, the house felt charged. Not in a dramatic way, but in that strange stillness before a match is struck. Harold had called earlier that day. He'd be home late, maybe past midnight, so it was just me and Evan again. I didn't dress for him, or at least that's what I told myself, but I did stand a little longer in front of the mirror. My dress that night was silk, soft, pale gray, cut low in the back. It whispered more than it spoke. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the back porch, let the air settle around me, and then I heard the screen door open. Evan. He stepped outside, barefoot, his hair still damp from a shower, white t-shirt, loose jeans, no words. He just stood there, leaning against the frame, watching me. I turned to him and smiled, slow and small. He stepped forward. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded. He sat beside me, close, too close. I could smell the soap on his skin, and something else, warmer, sharper. Him. We talked about nothing. The sky. The heat. A raccoon he'd seen near the trash bins. But the silence between our sentences, it said everything else. His leg brushed mine. Neither of us moved. At one point, I laughed at something he said, and he looked at me. No, not at me. Through me. There was no pretense in his gaze now. No stepson. No mother. Just two people. On a porch, with a line between them so thin it could be mistaken for light. And then he reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered, longer than they should have. My breath caught, but I didn't lean in, and neither did he. The moment stretched and broke. "I should get to bed," I whispered. He nodded. I stood up first, but before I walked back in, I turned just once. He was still there, watching me like I was a door he didn't dare open. There are things we don't say out loud, because once they're spoken, they become real. It was the morning after that porch night. The air was quieter than usual. Even the birds seemed to know something had changed. Harold was back home late, still asleep upstairs. I moved through the kitchen, trying to act normal, trying to feel normal. Then I saw it, folded, neat. Left right beside the coffee maker, a letter. No envelope, just my name. Claire, written carefully in black ink across the front. I hesitated. Then I opened it. Claire. I hope this doesn't make things worse, but I can't keep pretending nothing's happening. I've tried to ignore it, to act like it's just in my head. But every time I'm near you, it feels more real than anything else. You look at me like you know something I don't, and when you smile, it stays with me for hours. I know this is wrong. I know you're married to my dad. I know all the reasons why I should stay silent. But if things were different, if you weren't who you are, and I wasn't who I am, I think we both know what would happen. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. Because the way you make me feel, it's not going away. Evan. I read it once, then again, and a third time slower. I stood there barefoot on cold tile, holding paper that suddenly felt heavier than it looked. My heart was calm, but my hands trembled. It wasn't the words. It was what I heard between them. Everything we hadn't said, everything we couldn't say, spelled out, inked in truth. I folded the letter slowly, lit a match, watched it burn in the kitchen sink, and I cried. Not because I was ashamed, but because for the first time in years, someone had seen me, not as a wife, not as a stepmother, but as a woman. Some fires don't go out. They just wait for the next breeze. I tried to reset. After the letter, I told myself we'd crossed a line and that was it. No more stolen glances, no more silent almosts. I started avoiding him, moved faster through rooms, kept doors closed, took longer walks, smiled less. It helped at first, but then the small things came back. The way he said my name so softly, I almost didn't hear it. The way he'd wait an extra second before walking away, like he was giving me time to change my mind. And his eyes, always his eyes, watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Not hungry, not desperate, just certain. Certain that something lived between us, whether we spoke of it or not. One night we passed each other in the hallway. I was carrying laundry. He was coming from the shower towel over his shoulder. We brushed shoulders. Should have meant nothing. But my skin remembered, and so did his. He didn't say a word, just kept walking. But that night, I dreamt of him. Not the way a woman dreams of a man, but the way someone dreams of what they're not supposed to want. When I woke up, my chest ached with something unspoken. At dinner the next day, Harold told a joke. I laughed, and across the table, Evan smiled too. Our eyes met for less than a second, but it was enough. Enough to know that the distance I was trying to create wasn't working. That whatever we were becoming, was still there. Still alive, still waiting. Sometimes the most dangerous touch is the one that almost happens. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I couldn't sleep. The house was still. I walked down to the kitchen, barefoot, wearing a thin robe and an old t-shirt underneath. Nothing special. But somehow, I felt exposed. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, letting the cool tile ground me. Then I heard the floor creak. I turned, and there he was, Evan, hair tousled, shirtless, wearing only sweatpants, eyes a little glassy, like he hadn't expected to see me either. We both froze. I couldn't sleep. He said, "Me neither." I replied. He walked to the fridge, grabbed some juice, leaned beside me at the counter. Close again. Too close. And there it was again. That silence. Heavy waiting. A space filled with things that didn't have names. I dropped the glass. It shattered water splashing across the floor. We both bent down at once, and suddenly we were inches apart. I could see the rise and fall of his chest, the flicker of candlelight in his eyes, the small cut on his lip. He must have gotten shaving. He looked at me. No mask, no fear, just truth. His hand touched mine as we picked up a shard. Neither of us moved. My breath came shallow. I could feel the pulse in my throat. He leaned in, slowly, carefully, like asking a question with no words, and I let him come close, too close. For a moment, our noses nearly brushed. Our lips just hovered, and then I pulled away. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did, I can't. I whispered. He didn't say anything, just nodded eyes soft, like he understood. But I saw it in his face that this moment wasn't going to disappear. It would follow us, live in the space between every word we'd speak from now on. Some stories don't end with words, just silence, and the way someone doesn't look at you anymore. The next morning, the house felt too bright. The sun came in through every window, like it was trying to expose something. I made coffee, didn't add sugar like usual, didn't eat breakfast. Evan didn't come downstairs, not until almost noon. When he finally did, he looked normal. T-shirt, jeans, headphones slung around his neck, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "Morning," he said barely. "Hey," I whispered back. That was it. He grabbed a protein bar, his car keys, and walked out the door. No mention of last night, no pause at the doorway, no glance back. It should have made things easier, but it didn't. It made everything heavier. Over the next few days, we became strangers in the same house, speaking only when necessary, passing each other like shadows. Once I caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. He saw me looking. We both looked away, not in anger, not in shame, but in knowing. in understanding what had almost happened, what almost meant. One afternoon, I found a note tucked under my mug, just 3 words, written in his familiar handwriting. I still do. No explanation, no context. But I knew exactly what he meant, and I didn't reply. Because what could I say? Sometimes the most honest answer is the one you never send. That night, I stood outside his door for a long time. I didn't knock, just listened. I could hear him moving, soft, rhythmic, like someone folding clothes or memories. I rested my palm against the wood and whispered so low, even the walls might not remember it. Me too. Then I walked away. Not because it was over, but because some things never really end. Not every story ends with closure. Some just settle in the soft corners of memory, quiet, unfinished, unforgettable. It's been months. Evan moved out 2 weeks after that night. No long conversation. No confessions. Just a quiet packing of bags. A polite thanks for everything. A final door click. And then silence. Harold never noticed anything. Not the shift in my voice. Not the way Evan and I stopped making eye contact at dinner. He just kept telling everyone how great it was to have his boy home for a while. I smiled, laughed when expected, played the role. But something in me changed, not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. There's a strange kind of heartbreak in almost, because it leaves no wounds, only echoes. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that porch, the broken glass, the whisper at his door, and the way my name sounded in his voice like a secret he wasn't supposed to say out loud. But life moves. Laundry piles, bills, arrive, groceries, get bought and put away. And the heart learns how to file certain memories under Do Not Disturb. Still, I wonder, was it wrong? Or was it just human? Was it desire? Or was it simply 2 lonely people brushing up against something warm in a cold house? Here's what I've come to believe. Sometimes we don't need to act on something to feel its power. Sometimes just being seen, really seen, is enough to shift the ground beneath us. And sometimes the ones we don't touch leave the deepest fingerprints. So no, this isn't a love story, but it is a story about longing, about lines we almost crossed, and how not crossing them might be the thing that saved us, or maybe the thing that broke us forever. I guess that's the part I'll never know. Have you ever felt something you couldn't explain? Something quiet, but undeniable. A connection you never acted on, but never forgot. Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, even just a little, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay a while. There are more stories, and some of them might be yours too.